Oh, damn, Canada. Hey, everyone. This forced income slash wealth redistribution model, well, the moral hazards that are being introduced, and not just rampant, but escalating seemingly endlessly at this stage of the game. Yeah, it's omnipresent and all around us. Headline out of the Financial Post. Newspaper publishers ask Ottawa for $350 million a year to save print journalism. So, like I say, businesses now just look to governments. Use that forced wealth or income redistribution model as a means to an end. There's no longer any guise of holding themselves to a particular standard, higher standard, morally, ethically, in terms of business sense, right? Number crunching, right? Being financially or economically accountable and astute. Like I say, that after the crash, when all the banks, whether or GM or Bombardier or like down in the U.S., Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all these. I mean, in all of Western developed countries, I mean, look at how many of these corporations and government hacks were bailed out and protected by stealing not just from the productive people in the here and now, but from the productive people that are just infants or not even born as of yet. Because these debt obligations, well, look at the levels of the debt obligations. You think you could pay that off anytime soon? Right? It can't be done. This is decades and decades off before, even if they stopped doing this shit now, it would take decades to try to pay off the kind of ridiculous amounts of debts and deficits that governments and these crony fucks have been imposing on the regular masses of people, like just your working, the productive classes in any given geographical landmass, right? This is how devastatingly disgusting. And like I say, once you start down that road, well, then you're at a race to the bottom. And we're seeing that race is being ramped up and the pace is quickening all the time. Newspaper publishers, crippled by the digital content revolution that is destroying their business model, have banded together to ask Ottawa to create a $350 million fund to aid the print and online media industry. The Canadian Journalism Fund would reimburse newspapers and web-based journalism providers 35% of a journalist's salary, capped at $85,000 per year, in line with 5-year union rates, says the proposal from News Media Canada, created last fall through a mergers of the Canadian Newspaper Association and the Canadian Community Newspapers Association. The publishers say they're only asking for the kind of support that governments already funnel to other media. Well, governments shouldn't be funneling. Like I said, that race to the bottom, right? Hey, you're giving them theirs, you got to give me mine. Well, like I say, and we all know this term. We've heard at least most of us, right? Eventually, you run out of other people's money. That whole pretense of socialism. Well, like I said, it's bad enough when you have private citizens that are socialists. But it's paramount and massively worse when you have corporations and, bigwig execs or academia putting forth and presented their own narratives that aligns completely with this forced wealth redistribution model. That's when you know you're in serious danger, right? They note that the Trudeau government increased the CBC's budget by $135 million per year. The Canadian Media Fund contributed $371 million to television and media projects in 2015-2016. The CRTC will introduce $90 million in new support for local TV in September, and the Canadian Periodical Fund currently funnels $75 million a year to magazine publishers. So like I say, you as the taxpayer, you wonder why you got to work half the year to fucking before you get to keep even one dime yourself? Well, look at you as the taxpayer, the tax serf, the tax slaves, right? It's the wage slaves in Canada. Look at how many fucking these people aren't poor like you, but because they can steal from a whole bunch of you. So it's like, it's not just you. They might only be stealing a few bucks each from you, but if you take that over the, like 20 some million of productive people in Canada, well, look at you productive people in Canada are subsidizing very heavily to a major degree. I mean, almost. I mean, I don't know at what stage of the game you can become full-on communist or socialist, right? Whereas we live in this third way, but the third way is being pushed. That goalpost is pushed to the point where they're trying to bring in full-on forced subjugation and collectivism into our countries. And this tells you, look at how much, and it's like, what, shouldn't these businesses be able to generate a profit if they're producing anything that's beneficial to society and people are willing to consume and pay for it? Well, why? Well, look at, and you know why. Because they're not producing anything much. I mean, look at, they present articles, and what do I got to do? As a lowly fucking person that makes fucking shit, man. Well, for what I do here, I'm not making one dime. But I mean, at least, even without making one dime, I'm trying to make up and compensate for the fucking detriments that these people and the misinformation or the lack of information that you're given with properly, the proper objective information, I'm having to do that for them. They're not even one, and yet they're the ones making all this money and look to be subsidized. I'm doing it, and I'm not asking for a fucking dime. What does that tell you? That should tell you a whole lot. Because I seem to be able to get through my life. My family's pretty happy. We're all pretty fucking well-adjusted, good fucking people, decent human beings. And we can still function without having to use the forced wealth redistribution model as a means to an end. But these fuckers can't. And they have way, way, way more income or money at their disposal than I could ever hope for in my lifetime. Like I said, it's got to tell you something. Put it all together and you've got a pretty uneven playing field, Bob Cox, publisher of the Winnipeg Free Press and chair of News Media Canada, said. The Canadian Journalists Fund would fold in the $75 million from the Canadian Periodicals Fund and would finance both newspaper and magazine journalism. It adds up to $350 million, Cox said. That's the figure we have thrown out there. So, like I say, and I'm not going to read any more into this article. I'll leave it up to you. I'll put this in the description in the video below. So, like I say, read on, listen to what these fuckers are saying. But basically what they're saying is subsidize, 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 forced wealth redistribution, forced income redistribution, make the poor, make the productive class pay for the parasitical class. Constantly, race to the bottom. Fortunately, National Post, Andrew Coyne, is somewhat more principled than his counterparts in the media. In this particular headline, why the media should say no to a government bailout. I agree with you wholly there, Andrew Coyne. Maybe you saw those stories on Thursday about the Commons Canadian Heritage Committee proposing a tax on internet providers, the proceeds going to help the Canadian media. Maybe you also saw Justin Trudeau forcefully reject the idea. Maybe you thought this meant the government would keep its hands off the media. Think again. Yes, the government may have rejected this particular proposal. It may indeed be averse, as the Prime Minister said, to raising taxes on the middle class, but it is very much interested in bailing out the media, by which I mean particularly the company I work for, Post Media. Almost as interested as Post Media is in being bailed out. It was the Trudeau government that commissioned the report by the Public Policy Forum, The Shattered Mirror, calling for government funding in the news media. It was the government, likewise, that initiated discussions with the industry on the subject. It is not surprising, then, to find a high degree of similarity in the recommendations of the PPF. The Heritage Committee, or rather its Liberal majority, the Conservatives, to their credit, dissented, and the very next day, News Media Canada, the publishers' lobby group, the same calls for government support, whether overt or hidden in the tax code, the same assurances that everything would be at arm's length, the same hyping of fear that otherwise the news industry would disappear, the same double-sided insistence that this is a temporary emergency measure and yet nothing new since the industry has always been subsidized. So we must assume it's going to happen. The industry wants to be helped and the government wants to be seen helping it. And all of the elaborate exchange of courtesies that is now going on is simply to provide cover for a decision that has already been taken. So once again, in addition, they're looking to use that forced income redistribution model to prop up the failing media. Like I say, There's no longer a pretense of trying to hold anyone to account as a consumer anymore, because every time you will try, it will be axed or cut off immediately by those who want to keep this pretense of forced subjugation and forced collectivism and globalism and basically global socialism as the pretense, as the basis, as the underlying fundamental for human prosperity and growth. Those people will not allow free markets, proper ideas, holding each other to account. They will not allow that to happen. Not under their watch. These are people, like I say, they are unwilling to be competitive in any way. They always want to use the carrot and stick in addition to the heavy hammer of the government to force their ideas, their preference, and their edicts onto everyone else. That is their only means, that is their only method they are comfortable with in using as a means to an end. Whereas those of us in the private sector, those of us that just have to function in the real world, well, you know how perilous that can be. We have no pretense of getting bailed out. We have no pretense of being able to walk up to some stranger or a rich, wealthy person in this country and holding a gun to the head and saying, you have to bail me out. Yes, I made some stupid fucking decisions. Yes, I'm ultimately the one that's personally responsible for all the fucking suffering that I'm currently undergoing. But you know what? I don't like this suffering, so I want you to do the suffering for me. No one in the private sector, no one outside of government or these crony corporations would ever even have the pretense or even would probably wish to seek out that pretense of authority or ability to force others to pay for their own malinvestments, misdeeds, immoral or unjust acts or behaviors. None of us should want to or ever would want to. Central planners, governments, like I say, these control freaks and sociopaths, completely different scenario. As you're seeing, they have no worries, they have no qualms whatsoever. If they can trick you, if they can compel you, if they can use some compulsive measures or means to force you to prop them up, to paint over, or to deny or negate any of their bad past behaviors or devious practices, they will take full advantage of that the minute they know that it exists. It's so important that we push back against this stuff because, like I say, look at how prevalent it's become. It's not just a one-off anymore. It's not just like when they were doing the bailout for after financial crashes, the crash of 2008, the Great Recession. They were like, oh, we're only going to do this. Trust me, we would never do this. We're only going to do this one time real quick. And it's like, please, please, please just let us do it. And then we'll be okay. We'll do better subsequent to this. Have they? No. They've only become more emboldened to do more and more of the same. To actually seek more and more ways, means, or measures to take even more from the productive class to give to the parasitical class, right? So now you're looking at, there's a rampant growth in the parasitical class and a great shrinkage of the productive class. And that's a direct reflection of these kinds of habits and behaviors and this kind of pretense of central planning and authority. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.